The dim lighting of the upscale steakhouse cast long shadows across the polished mahogany tables, where the elite of the city gathered to indulge in their excesses. It was a place where fortunes were discussed over aged steaks and vintage wines, a sanctuary for the wealthy who believed the world bent to their whims. At the center of one such table sat Victor Hargrove, a self-made millionaire whose empire in real estate development had turned sleepy urban lots into gleaming skyscrapers. Victor was a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered with a perpetual scowl etched into his chiseled features, his custom-tailored suit straining against his frame from years of indulgent living. His wealth had bought him everything, mansions, yachts, a fleet of luxury cars, but it hadn't tempered the volatility that simmered beneath his polished exterior. Tonight, that temper was about to erupt. Across from him was his wife, Elena Hargrove, 7 months pregnant with their first child. Elena was a vision of quiet grace, her long auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, her simple black dress doing little to hide the swell of her belly. At 32, she had once been a promising artist, her canvases filled with vibrant landscapes that captured the soul of the countryside she grew up in. But marriage to Victor had dimmed that spark. His demanding schedule and controlling nature had confined her to the role of trophy wife, her dreams shelved in favor of hosting galas and attending charity events. The pregnancy had been a surprise, one Victor had initially celebrated with grand gestures, a nursery designed by top architects, baby clothes from Paris, but lately, his enthusiasm had soured into resentment. He saw the child as another expense, another tether to a life he felt was slipping from his grasp amid mounting business pressures. The evening had started innocently enough. Victor had insisted on this dinner to celebrate a recent deal, though Elena knew it was more about impressing his business associates who sat nearby, laughing boisterously at crude jokes. She had ordered a modest salad and sparkling water, her appetite dulled by the baby's constant kicks and the nausea that lingered from her morning sickness. Victor, on the other hand, was on his third scotch, his voice growing louder with each sip. The conversation had veered from stocks to politics, and then, inevitably, to Elena's pregnancy. "You know, Victor," one of the associates had quipped, "fatherhood's going to cramp your style. No more late nights at the club." The table erupted in laughter, but Victor's face darkened. He shot a glare at Elena, as if she were the source of this impending disruption to his bachelor-like freedom. Elena tried to steer the talk elsewhere, mentioning a recent art exhibit she'd attended alone while Victor was away on business. "It was beautiful," she said softly, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "The colors reminded me of the sunsets back home in Texas." But Victor wasn't listening. He was fixated on her words, interpreting them as a subtle complaint about his absence. "Texas? You mean that backwater hole you crawled out of?" he snarled, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a knife. The associates shifted uncomfortably, but none dared intervene. Elena's cheeks flushed, her eyes dropping to her plate. She had endured his barbs before, private jabs about her simple upbringing, her lack of connections in his high society world, but tonight, with the baby due in just 2 months, it stung deeper. As the waiter approached to refill their glasses, Victor's frustration boiled over. The man was new to the restaurant, or at least Elena thought so, she didn't recognize him from previous visits. He was tall and lean, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that seemed to scan the room with unnatural precision. His uniform was impeccable, but there was something about his posture, rigid, alert, that set him apart from the usual staff. Victor, oblivious, waved him off dismissively. "Can't you see we're busy here? Get lost." The waiter nodded politely and retreated, but not before exchanging a fleeting glance with Elena that she barely noticed in her distress. The argument escalated quickly. Victor leaned forward, his breath reeking of alcohol, and hissed at Elena, "You think you can just waltz in here, big as a house, and make me look like a fool? This kid better be worth it, or so help me." Elena's voice trembled as she responded, "Victor, please, not here. The baby's kicking, I'm just tired." But her plea only fueled his rage. In a flash, his hand shot out, slapping her across the face with a sharp crack that echoed through the dining room. Gasps rippled from nearby tables, silverware clattered as patrons turned to stare. Alina's head snapped to the side, her hand flying to her reddening cheek, tears welling in her eyes. The baby seemed to still inside her, as if sensing the shock. For a moment, time froze, the millionaire's face twisted in momentary regret, quickly masked by defiance, while his associates averted their eyes, pretending not to notice. But Elena wasn't alone. Unbeknownst to Victor, her brother, Jax Harlan, had been watching the entire scene unfold. Jax was no ordinary sibling, he was a decorated Marine sniper, fresh from his latest deployment in the Middle East, where his steady hand and unerring aim had saved countless lives. At 35, Jax was a wall of muscle honed by years of rigorous training, his dark hair cropped short, his green eyes, mirrors of Elena's, sharp and assessing. He had always been her protector, the big brother who taught her to ride a bike and defended her from schoolyard bullies. When Elena had confided in him about Victor's growing abusiveness during a late-night call weeks ago, Jax had vowed to intervene if things worsened. "I'm coming to the city," he'd said. "But I need to see it for myself." Posing as a waiter had been Jax's idea, a covert operation straight out of his military playbook. He'd pulled strings with an old Marine buddy who owned the steakhouse, securing the undercover role for the evening. Dressed in the standard black vest and tie, a name tag reading, Jake, pinned to his chest, Jax had blended seamlessly into the background, serving drinks and clearing plates while keeping Victor's table in his peripheral vision. His sniper training had taught him patience, the art of observation without detection. He'd noted Victor's increasing intoxication, the way his hand clenched into a fist during lulls in conversation, the subtle flinches Elena made when he raised his voice. Jax's heart had pounded with restrained fury, but he held back, waiting for the right moment. Slapping a pregnant woman in public. That was the line. That was when Jax would act. As the slap landed, Jax's instincts kicked in. He was already moving before the echoes faded, his waiter tray discarded on a side table with practiced nonchalance. The restaurant's manager, in on the plan, signaled the staff to stay clear, ensuring no interference. Victor, still seated, smirked at the attention, muttering, "She had it coming," to his cronies. But his smugness evaporated as Jax loomed over him, shedding the facade. "Get your hands off my sister, you piece of trash," Jax growled, his voice low and lethal, carrying the weight of a man who had stared down insurgents in hostile territories. Victor's eyes widened in confusion, then recognition dawned as Jax ripped off the fake name tag. "What the? Who the hell are you?" The millionaire sputtered, rising unsteadily to his feet. The associates backed away, chairs scraping against the floor. Elena, stunned, whispered, "Jax." "Oh God, Jax." Her brother nodded reassuringly, his focus locked on Victor. In one fluid motion, Jax grabbed Victor by the collar, yanking him forward across the table. Plates shattered, wine spilled like blood across the white linens. "I'm her brother, the one who's going to make sure you never touch her again," Jax said, his free hand balling into a fist. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Victor, for all his bluster and wealth, was no match for a trained Marine. He swung wildly, his scotch-fueled punch glancing off Jax's shoulder, but Jax countered with a precise jab to the solar plexus, doubling Victor over in agony. Gasps turned to murmurs as security hesitated. After all, this was a high-profile patron. But Jax wasn't done. He pinned Victor against the table, his knee pressing into the man's back. "You think money makes you invincible? Slapping a pregnant woman. You're done." Elena stood shakily, one hand on her belly, the other reaching for her brother. "Jax, the baby, please, let's just go." Sirens wailed in the distance, summoned by a discreet call from the manager. As police burst through the doors, Jax released Victor, who slumped to the floor, wheezing and humiliated. The millionaire's empire of intimidation had crumbled in an instant, exposed under the steakhouse's chandeliers. Elena, tears streaming down her face, hugged her brother tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Jax, ever the protector, replied, family first, always. The night that began with opulence ended in reckoning, a testament to the unbreakable bond between siblings and the folly of unchecked power. But as the dust settled, questions lingered. What would come next for Elena and her unborn child? The story was far from over. Word count 1024. The dim glow of crystal chandeliers cast long shadows across the opulent dining room of Le Chateau Steakhouse, where the elite of the city gathered to indulge in excess. It was a place where deals were sealed over aged scotch and where the air hummed with the quiet arrogance of those who believed the world bent to their will. At the center of one such table sat Reginald Harrington, a self-made millionaire whose fortune had been built on ruthless real estate ventures and a penchant for bending rules. His tailored Armani suit strained slightly against his broadening frame, a testament to years of lavish living, and his diamond cufflinks glinted as he gestured animatedly. Beside him, looking ethereal yet exhausted, was his wife, Elena, 7 months pregnant with their first child. Her gown, a flowing silk number chosen to accommodate her growing belly, seemed out of place in this den of sharp edges and sharper ambitions. She had once been the light in his life, a former model whose beauty had caught his eye at a charity gala, but tonight, that light flickered dimly under the weight of his growing frustrations. Reginald's laughter boomed earlier in the evening, recounting tales of his latest acquisition, a luxury condo development that had displaced an entire neighborhood, but as the wine flowed, his mood soured. Elena, ever the peacemaker, had tried to steer the conversation toward baby names and nursery plans, but Reginald dismissed her with a wave. Not now, darling, he slurred, his voice laced with irritation. The other guests at the table, business associates and social climbers, shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm brewing. Elena's hand instinctively rested on her belly, feeling the subtle kick of their unborn son, a reminder of the life she carried and the future she hoped would soften her husband's edges. But Reginald, emboldened by the privacy of the VIP booth and the sycophantic nods from his companions, let his temper unleash. It started with a snide comment about her weight gain, escalating to accusations of her ruining his image by not hiding her pregnancy better. You look like a beached whale in that dress, he hissed, loud enough for the table to hear. Elena's eyes welled with tears, but she bit her lip, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a scene. The slap came without warning. Reginald's hand shot out, connecting with her cheek in a sharp crack that echoed through the hushed room. Elena's head snapped to the side, her hand flying to her face as a red welt bloomed instantly. Gasps rippled from nearby tables, silverware clattering to plates as diners turned to stare. The business associates froze, their faces a mask of feigned shock, while the steakhouse staff hovered uncertainly at the periphery. Elena's world spun. Pain radiated from her cheek, but worse was the humiliation, the violation in front of strangers who now whispered behind manicured hands. She tasted blood from a split lip, and in that moment, a fierce protectiveness surged through her for the child she carried. Reginald, please, she whispered, her voice trembling, but he only sneered, leaning back in his chair as if nothing had happened. Learn your place, he muttered, reaching for his glass. Unbeknownst to Reginald, the slap had not gone unnoticed by everyone in the room. In the shadows of the service entrance, blending seamlessly with the waitstaff in a crisp black uniform and apron, stood Marcus Hale, Elena's older brother. A decorated Marine sniper with tours in Afghanistan and Iraq under his belt, Marcus had always been the family's silent guardian. At 6 feet 4 inches with a build honed by years of rigorous training, he moved with the predatory grace of a man who had spent countless hours in concealment, waiting for the perfect shot. His dark hair was slicked back under a server's cap, and his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, had been fixed on the Harrington table since the moment his sister and her husband arrived. Marcus had taken this undercover job on a whim, pulling strings through an old Marine buddy who managed the steakhouse's security. Officially, he was Jake, a temporary waiter filling in for the night shift, but his real purpose was reconnaissance. Elena had confided in him weeks earlier about Reginald's increasing volatility, the late-night rages, the controlling demands, the way he treated her like a possession rather than a partner. As a sniper, Marcus knew the value of patience, of observing from the shadows until the moment was right. Tonight, that moment had arrived. Marcus's heart pounded with a controlled fury as he watched the slap unfold. His training kicked in instinctively. Assess the threat, calculate the response, execute without hesitation. But this wasn't a battlefield in the desert, this was his sister's life, and the stakes were personal. He gripped the tray of empty glasses in his hand a little tighter, the knuckles whitening beneath his gloves. From his vantage point, he had a clear line of sight. Years of scoping targets had made him an expert at reading body language, and Reginald's arrogance was a glaring bullseye. Elena's eyes met his for a split second across the room, a silent plea flashing in her tear-streaked gaze. She knew he was there. They had a subtle signal, a family code from childhood games of hide-and-seek that had evolved into something far more serious. Marcus nodded imperceptibly, his jaw set like granite. Slipping into the kitchen momentarily to compose himself, Marcus shed the waiter facade just enough to radio his backup, a couple of off-duty cops he trusted from his military network. "It's go time," he murmured into the discreet earpiece hidden under his collar. The kitchen staff bustled around him, oblivious to the drama unfolding, chopping herbs and searing steaks on the grill. The aroma of garlic and butter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension coiling in Marcus's gut. He had seen enough domestic abuse in his deployments, witnessed the aftermath in war-torn villages where women suffered in silence, and it fueled a righteous anger he rarely let surface. Reginald Harrington thought his money shielded him from consequences, but Marcus knew better. Wealth couldn't buy anonymity in a world where justice sometimes wore a waiter's apron. Emerging back into the dining area, Marcus approached the table with deliberate calm, balancing a fresh round of drinks on his tray. "Evening, folks," he said in a neutral tone, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Reginald barely glanced up, waving him off dismissively. Yeah, just leave them and go." But Marcus lingered, his eyes locking onto Elena's reddened cheek. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, injecting just enough concern to draw attention without alarming the table. The business associates shifted awkwardly, one of them clearing his throat. Elena hesitated, her hand still on her face, but Marcus's presence gave her strength. No, I'm not," she whispered, her voice breaking. That was all it took. In a blur of motion, Marcus set the tray down and grabbed Reginald's wrist as the millionaire reached for his phone, no doubt to call his high-powered lawyer. "I think you've done enough damage tonight, sir," Marcus growled, his voice low and authoritative, the marine edge slipping through his Jake persona. Reginald's eyes widened in surprise, his face flushing with indignation. "Who the hell do you think you are? Get your hands off me." He tried to yank free, but Marcus's grip was ironclad, forged in sniper hides and combat drills. The diner erupted into chaos, guests standing, phones emerging to capture the confrontation, the manager rushing over with wide eyes. As the backup arrived, two burly figures in plainclothes weaving through the crowd, Marcus revealed his true identity. "I'm her brother, you piece of trash. And you're under arrest for assault." Reginald sputtered, his empire of bluster crumbling as handcuffs clicked into place. Elena rose shakily, supported by a female diner who offered a comforting arm, and watched as her abuser was led away. The steakhouse, once a symbol of Reginald's status, became the stage for his downfall. Marcus pulled Elena into a gentle hug, his sniper's precision now turned to protection. "You're safe now, sis. I've got you." Word of the incident spread like wildfire through the city's social circles, amplified by viral videos from onlookers. Reginald's arrest made headlines the next day. Millionaire's violent outburst at upscale eatery ends in humiliation. His business partners distanced themselves overnight, deals fell through, and his fortune began to erode under legal fees and public backlash. Elena, with Marcus's unwavering support, filed for divorce and sought counseling, her pregnancy now a beacon of hope rather than fear. She moved in with her brother temporarily, surrounded by the quiet strength of his Marine discipline and the love of a family that refused to let her suffer in silence. Marcus, for his part, returned to his day job as a security consultant, but the event reignited his passion for advocacy. He started speaking at women's shelters, sharing anonymized stories of intervention and the power of being the unseen watcher. The steakhouse incident became a legend, a tale whispered at dinner parties about the waiter who was more than he seemed. In the months that followed, Elena gave birth to a healthy boy, naming him after their late father, a symbol of resilience. Reginald, stripped of his ill-gotten arrogance, faced trial and community service, a far cry from his days of unchecked power. Yet, the story didn't end there. Rumors swirled that Reginald had connections, shadowy figures from his real estate dealings who might seek revenge. Marcus, ever vigilant, installed top-tier security at Elena's new home. One rainy night, as thunder rumbled outside, a suspicious car lingered at the end of the driveway. Marcus, positioned on the rooftop like in his sniper days, watched through night vision goggles. It was a false alarm, a lost delivery driver, but it reminded him that threats never truly vanished. Elena, rocking her baby to sleep, looked up at him with gratitude. "You saved us, Marcus." Not just that night, but every day since. As the city moved on, the bond between siblings deepened, forged in the fire of that fateful slap. Le Chateau Steakhouse added a new policy: mandatory sensitivity training for patrons, inspired by the waiter incident. In Reginald, he faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of how one moment of violence can topple an empire. For Elena and Marcus, it was a new beginning, where the undercover waiter emerged as the hero, proving that sometimes, justice wears a simple uniform and strikes from the shadows. Word count: 1024.